How do you define world-class? A world-class city.
We were a very large Fortune 500 city, and it looked like we had unlimited growing potential here.
A world-class airport.
Because of the foresight of so many citizens and community leaders, we possess aviation facilities unsurpassed by any metropolitan area.
A world-class town.
You could pick out any house you want as long as it's in Bridgeton.
A world-class community.
Everybody knew each other, neighbors were neighbors. Carrollton was a special place.
But what do you get when you listen to politics and ego over truth and science? A world-class boondoggle.
I am not going to jeopardize the economic future of this region for a few people.
The city of Bridgeton has been sold out by the city of St. Louis.
If you are to accomplish what you need to accomplish at Lambert, you have to go west.
It was like a bulldozer to democracy. Not only were they going to take people's homes, they were going to shut people up.
No, W1W!
That billion-dollar expansion plan will cut through the heart of Bridgeton.
Bridgeton is going to do what is necessary to protect Bridgeton.
They have no business destroying a good community.
I'm really concerned that we'll end up with a white elephant.
W1W will not give St. Louis a world-class airport.
This allows Lambert to go in the 21st century.
Anybody who objects to it, I think, has a head in the sand.
Was it worth the $1 billion?
Not this boondoggle.
It's all gone. And for what? For nothing.
We're going to have to borrow this money.
The city of somebody else is not going to eat this thing, and I don't think it'll be known as Greg's Folly.
But now what we have is a regional airport with a lot of debt.
What makes Bridgeton worth saving? We invite you to come along with us on a poignant look at our community, to see a city that symbolizes and embodies the American dream, a city steeped in history, with hopes and plans for the future.
Bridgeton was founded in 1794, and its population hovered around 200 people between 1880 and 1950. But its population soared in the 1960s and 1970s, reaching nearly 8,000 by 1960 and nearly 20,000 by 1970. The surge in population can mostly be attributed to the creation of the Carrollton subdivisions in 1956.
My name is Conrad Byers. I lived in Bridgeton since 1964. We're actually in our third house. Our first house was in the Carrollton subdivision, and when family grew, we moved outside to a house that we thought we'd be there forever, 11945 Gifts Road. Well, Carrollton was one of the first areas and one of the first self-developed or self-contained communities. I mean, it had churches, schools, shopping center. It even had a club for the residents, so it was sort of a self-contained community. In fact, received national recognition at that time.
Carrollton's 1,800 homes by far had the most people of any other subdivision in all of Bridgeton. The existence of Carrollton presented a new and appealing opportunity for middle-class families in the 1960s and 1970s.
My name is Charles Sapp. I lived at 4056 Gladwin in Bridgeton. To give you an idea of what Carrollton like, Carrollton had so much interest going in it that you actually had to campaign to be on the board of directors. People had so much interest they actually went out and recruited.
My name is Jack Taylor. Bought my first home in 1977 at 12652 Selburne. Carrollton was a vibrant, fun, great place to raise a family. Everybody knew each other, neighbors were neighbors. Carrollton was a special place.
We had baseball teams, we had 4 swimming pools at the community center. Being a family community, I mean, we knew people through the schools and all the kids. And so when you were there for 20 years, going to the grocery store was kind of a major outing because you spent so much time talking to your friends and neighbors that it took more time than shopping for groceries.
My name is Jamie Desi Shonaweiss. My address was 12636 Brumley Drive. And when we moved to Carrollton, it felt normal. It really kind of felt like it was its own sort of nestled community.
My name is Maggie Taylor. When I was 8 years old, we moved to 12748 Marburn Lane. We absolutely loved that community. I got my first job at Carrollton Pool. That pool was the hub of my summers. We never had to leave there. There was something to do all the time.
1,800 homes, a great community. a most unusual neighborhood. And Bridgeton itself was much like that. I mean, you'll find that Bridgeton was a family-type community. People cared about what happened to you and what happened to your neighbors.
Bridgeton continued to thrive, and many Carrollton residents worked nearby for McDonnell Douglas, Trans World Airlines, or in some other form at St. Louis Lambert International Airport. Carrollton residents helped transform Lambert into a world-class airport.
Because of the foresight of so many citizens and community leaders, we possess aviation facilities unsurpassed by any metropolitan area.
While the Carrollton community in Bridgeton opened in 1956, Lambert Airport had their own grand opening in the same year with the debut of Terminal 1. At the time, it was a world-class terminal and set the tone for many modern airline terminals to come.
All of these men and women have worked toward a common goal, that of giving St. Louis the most modern air facilities in the world.
Lambert continued to be trailblazers through the jet and space age, and residents of the Carrollton subdivision had a hand in putting St. Louis on the cutting edge of the aviation industry.
We had tremendous experience in the aviation business because so many people had lived in Carrollton, worked for McDonnell Douglas. I mean, we had people who had created and engineered the Mercury spacecraft, Apollo, Gemini, the F-14. I think we had more aviation expertise and aviation engineering expertise than anybody in Washington, D.C.
Lambert's growth was astronomical, with the annual number of passengers increasing from 500,000 in 1950 to nearly 6 million in 1972. Lambert needed to expand, but was now landlocked after missing an opportunity to buy surrounding unoccupied land in the 1950s in anticipation of further expansion.
Lambert was not unusual in being landlocked. It was actually probably more typical. When it was first built, look at the old pictures. It was farmland. And now it is in the middle of the city.
So there was a push to come up with a less expensive and less disruptive alternative to expanding Lambert, and that was to build a new airport. The idea gained steam in the 1970s to build a regional airport in the Columbia and Waterloo area of Illinois.
If you look back at Lambert expansion, they were talking about the need for growth back in '76 when Columbia Waterloo came up, and that was a proposal. And it was actually being considered by the FAA. And then it was delayed, and not more than a year later, we got a new transportation secretary, and the funding was cut. And the reason it was probably cut was it didn't focus on the city of St. Louis and Lambert and the region. And I think that's the trouble with our leaders in the region. They're too focused on serving themselves and rather than serving the region.
There have been lots of studies, lots of discussion about building another airport. That faced a lot of political opposition because it's not in Missouri. It's in Illinois, and therefore the leadership recognized that putting an airport over there would be a bad idea. I think some of that provincialism hurt St. Louis.
Lambert was essentially saved, and the airport would rebuild and expand its runway shortly after that decision. But after airline deregulation in 1978, most airlines adopted a hub-and-spoke model. Ultimately, TWA chose St. Louis as its major domestic hub in 1982.
The major carriers decided that what we call hub airports, that you would have spoke cities, and then you would funnel your passengers into that hub airport. It was a great way for an airline to connect its passengers from small communities to large communities and international destinations. The problem or the downside with a hub and spoke operation is that once one airline dominates the traffic in that community, the community kind of becomes beholden to that particular airline. And so you kind of go all in current, parlance. We're all in for our hometown airline.
The drums would beat again for airport expansion as TWA invested more in its hub in St. Louis throughout the 1980s. But in addition to being landlocked, there was another wrinkle with expanding Lambert. The city of St. Louis owned the airport, even though Lambert is located in St. Louis County, meaning a county municipality would be affected no matter which direction the city wanted to expand Lambert. Known as the Great Divorce, the city of St. Louis split from St. Louis County in 1877.
There's a long history of tension between the city of St. Louis and the municipalities of St. Louis County. Some of that goes back literally 100 years. And the city of St. Louis did what city of St. Louis wanted to do. And it didn't really historically pay a lot of attention to what the smaller municipalities in the county wanted or didn't want.
But the city and county were in much different positions a century later after the split. St. Louis County more than doubled its population over a 20-year span between 1950 and 1970. St. Louis City's population plummeted, from more than 850,000 in 1950 to less than 400,000 by 1990.
We were a very large Fortune 500 city, and it looked like we had unlimited growing potential here. But the key thing was, everything was changing in terms of industry, consumer patterns, growth in population, mergers and acquisitions. All these things were changing and changing very rapidly. What you had to do was to pay attention to what was happening to the city itself.
With times changing and the city of St. Louis rapidly losing its tax base, Lambert was arguably the most important revenue producer left for the city. And with local leaders passing on building a brand new airport for the region, it was now Lambert or bust for a world-class airport in St. Louis, leading to an inevitable collision course more than a century in the making.
The concept of home rule is so much part of the political atmosphere, the political dynamic in St. Louis County. There's a reason why St. Louis County has so many jurisdictions. People feel very loyal to their town. So a lot of this was really historically set up for a long time, that there was going to be a battle if the city of St. Louis ever wanted to go past its boundary.
The airport is landlocked. That is, it's surrounded by cities. To expand means to invade one of them.
You can't build a world-class airport with something that's landlocked like Lambert.
You can't attack this job with the idea of keeping everybody happy all the time. You have to make decisions and you have to live with the consequences.
The man who ultimately became the face of Lambert's attempt to maintain its world-class status was former mayor of St. Louis, Vince Schamel. Schamel became the mayor in 1981 and was in office during Lambert's ascent following the impact of deregulation. In the late 1980s, Lambert's annual passenger traffic exceeded 20 million and was ranked in the top 10 busiest airports nationwide, prompting this call to action from Schamel.
Lambert is the lifeblood of this city's and region's economy. And we have got to get on with the business of expanding it.
And with that began the first of many editorials in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch over the next several years, touting the expansion of Lambert. And it came from the mayor himself on June 25, 1989. Schamel's piece stoked fear that the St. Louis region's economic outlook was in doubt unless Lambert expanded. Schamel foreshadowed what would come later that summer when he said, "Air traffic future must be governed by the needs of the entire St. Louis region of 2.5 million people, and not by the preferences of individuals in the path of the airport's expansion."
I am not going to jeopardize the economic future of this region for a few people.
And on the evening of Friday, August 25th, 1989, everything changed forever in Bridgeton.
Well, there is shock and anger in Bridgeton tonight among residents who now find their homes in the path of airport expansion.
Jennifer, officials have narrowed down their choices for airport expansion to 4 plans. What the people of Bridgeton don't like is that all of them run through their city.
We had no indication. We were stunned. We read about it in the paper.
And there was the Post-Dispatch on the driveway, and I opened it up, and right in the middle of the front page was a big color photo with a map saying airport is expanding. We're coming right through Bridgeton. Realistically, that runway was coming right through my living room.
The city of Bridgeton has been sold out by the city of St. Louis. We have no input whatsoever and no representation.
And I personally was very surprised because just 3 years prior to that, Leonard Griggs, Colonel Griggs, was the director, and he actually addressed city council. I was on city council at the time, and he wrote a letter. I have the letter. But Lambert would never expand west. They would never expand the airport west of Lambert.
The Carrollton Oaks subdivision is the neighborhood Bridgeton officials believe to be most at risk from the airport expansion plan. Bridgeton officials believe eventually the whole 1,800 home neighborhood might be gone.
I would not consider Bridgeton or any of the neighbors to be obstructionists. We recognize the value of airport expansion and the need for it in the region. We always look to a plan that would reduce delays, increased activity at the airport, but not at tremendous expense on the environment.
It's not the idea, they claim. It's the way Mayor Vincent Schamel and other politicians are trying to bulldoze their way across the Bridgeton community.
The airport promised all along that the airport neighbors would be involved in this process, and we were not involved. We were left out, and we personally hold Vincent Schamel responsible.
Schamel's strategy oftentimes on issues were, we're the city of St. Louis, we have a right to do what we want to do, and we're just going to move full speed ahead to do that.
That emanated from the fact that the city owns the airport and the land, but it's located in St. Louis County. And for that reason, the city, I think, took the attitude that These people don't vote for us. They don't pay any taxes to us. They told us, here's what we're going to do. Get out of the way.
The City of St. Louis paid consulting firm Landrum & Brown to analyze 27 possible plans to prepare Lambert for the 21st century. The firm whittled that down to 4 alternatives, with all 4 cutting through Bridgeton. But the Airport Commission would have to ultimately accept the final recommendation of the consultants, and that approval was a foregone conclusion.
You look at the Airport Commission at that time, consisted of 10 members. 4 of them were elected officials from the City of St. Louis. 1 was a director, and there were 5 appointed by the mayor. So the Airport Commission, really just an extension of the mayor's office.
We're just absolutely shocked by the tyranny in this particular situation where one person, the mayor of the City of St. Louis, controls the whole process.
The City of St. Louis is dictating to the county the expansion plans that they feel is required. They're dictating those to the county. There's no representation there. That is a major problem. The county has never had any representation on a city-owned and operated airport in the county.
The city would increase the number of seats on the Airport Commission to 15, and for the first time ever, gave seats to St. Louis County. But the city still made sure they held all the cards.
We really need regional representation. This is not it. It's only a start, because the way it stands now, we'll have 5 members. There'll be 10 from the City of St. Louis, and if it's going to be a regional vote, losing 10 to 5 is the same as losing 10 or 9 to nothing.
Bridgeton knew it was going to be impacted. It was just a matter of which plan was chosen and when it would be announced. So Carrollton residents were caught in a state of limbo and wanted answers.
The more we asked for cooperation, the less response we got.
And the answer wouldn't come until October 12th, 1989.
Good evening. A $1 billion plan for expanding Lambert Airport has been accepted.
And the spark that ignited this controversy is dubbed the F4 proposal.
2 new runways would be built near the existing runways, but a 3rd runway, more than 1.5 miles long, would extend northwest into Bridgeton.
And if you think that we are going to sit by and watch a runway like an alley through these residential areas and not object in the strongest possible way, you're wrong.
The people that got affected the most immediately was the real estate market. Those who had their homes on, or were going to sell their homes, or already had them on sale, that was dead. It killed the real estate market in Carrollton.
We cannot be the community we want to be if we don't have an airport that can service our needs in the 21st century.
St. Louis needs something approaching a silk purse, and Mayor Schamel is proposing to deliver to the people of that metropolitan area a sow's ear. It won't work.
F4 had a price tag of more than $1 billion and also would have wiped out nearly 1,000 homes in Bridgeton. And concerns about F4's viability came from the people who worked at Lambert every day, the pilots and air traffic controllers.
The pilots we looked at that as just being a hugely hazardous operation. Anytime you mix airplanes and construction equipment on an airfield, it requires a lot of caution, slows everything down. It was just an unworkable solution.
I'm an air traffic controller by trade and was working at Lambert at the time. The F4 proposal was so sort of bizarre and so absolutely ridiculous that it as presented, it didn't make sense. I went to the interviews at the airport, to the presentations, and honestly, the things they said they were going to do was not legal by our current rules and standards. In fact, they're not legal today. But they said, well, we'll change the rules as we have to and all that. It just didn't make any sense. I thought it was dead upon arrival.
The F4 plan was like having root canal work done while you're having dinner.
It was trying to build an airport on top of an existing operating airport.
Bridgeton received minimal political support outside their city, but did find an ally in their congressman from Missouri's 2nd Congressional District, Jack Buechner.
It is improper, and I believe it is unconstitutional, to have a city airport run by city people deciding the fate of county taxpayers.
A lot of these estimates are based upon a geometric increase of passengers, which includes in it what happened during the deregulation. I don't think you're going to see that same kind of a hump occur again.
Despite the concerns and questions raised from Bridgeton residents on all these factors regarding the F4 proposal, they still felt the city of St. Louis wasn't listening or communicating. So the Carrollton neighborhood got the attention of Schamel and the city of St. Louis.
Bridgeton residents are out tonight protesting plans to expand Lambert Airport into their community.
Tonight, a huge bonfire brought together hundreds in the community.
St. Louis Mayor Vince Schamel was burned in effigy tonight.
We strongly feel that it's a great place to live, and we hate to see someone that's not involved
from the city come out and try to take away what we've built over the years.
This bonfire tonight may signal the start of a new and more active opposition.
After the announcement of F4 and the Carrollton bonfire, Shamel told the Post-Dispatch that expansion has to happen and added more fuel to the fire, saying, "I think they've effectively killed the real estate market of Bridgeton by their reaction. The airport expansion has a small impact on Bridgeton proper, but by elevating the debate to such a level, they have tarred all of Bridgeton."
That's ridiculous. We're reacting to an announcement that they made. That announcement has really impacted real estate, and try to pass that on to anyone else is ridiculous. People with any common sense will not buy that.
While Vince Shamel was crowned the champion for the airport and business community to expand Lambert, he became the villain for Bridgeton.
He asked to have lunch with me, and so I went. And I said, "Vince, if you do one thing for the future," I said, "go out there with a committee and talk to Bowers and tell those people what's going on and what we intend to do." And he wouldn't do it. And he basically said, "I don't have to." And I said, "Okay, these people, you don't understand what these people can do." And that was it. There was no more communication. And that's what started it.
That announcement gave birth to the Bridgeton Air Defense, a grassroots efforts by residents to block the expansion and save their homes.
The final goal for us was to ensure that our property and our families were protected and that everybody got a fair market value for their property. And so we put together an organization of the people and went to work.
Basically, we're dealing with a bunch of people that they're going to plow ahead, do their own plan, and not listen to reason or not even do it from an honest engineering perspective.
Bridgeton Air Defense served a tremendous value to the community. They pulled together a lot of people that understood airline operations, and they were able to provide that information to the public in ways that Bridgeton and the City Council could not, and really get the citizenry involved in the airport activities.
I think they're nothing short of brilliant. And they did an extraordinary job in part because the leaders recognized that this was an advertising campaign. This was a campaign to win the hearts and minds, not just of Bridgeton, not just of St. Louis, but really of the entire community.
I was in the public relations business. That was my career, my whole professional life. So we had a lot of expertise in a lot of areas.
They launched a number of measures that in the political realm caused a lot of people to scratch their heads. We don't do these sort of things in the political realm. You know, they had bumper stickers. The Shamel Happens bumper sticker. They had protests in front of Shamel's house where they would park their cars on a Sunday morning and play cassette tapes of jet noise in their cars, with their windows open, by the way. They employed all of the good, what I would call sort of guerrilla warfare political techniques that today are viewed much more commonly.
There's no doubt that the folks in Bridgeton have launched a very savvy PR campaign against Lambert expansion. These yellow ribbons are just one part of it, but they say by far the most successful part is something called the Bad Hotline.
This is your 24-hour St. Louis County Bridgeton Air Defense Hotline report, day 25, Bridgeton held hostage.
From today's vantage point, the Bad Hotline seems kind of hokey. But before social media, before people had ways of really communicating in real time about events, Bridgeton Air Defense set up a hotline that people could call to get the latest information, to pass information back and forth.
Mayor Bowers says the Bad Hotline isn't meant to be malicious, but since they've instituted something called the Shamel Joke of the Day, response has gone from hundreds to over 1,000.
And now the Shamel Joke of the Day. The devil recently approached Shamel and told him, "Vince, we can make this entire airport fiasco go away. The only thing is, you've got to assign your soul to me for all eternity." To which Vince replied, "So, what's the catch?"
All because a few people have just let their lives be taken over by hatred. I really feel sorry for these people. They're sick.
The Bad Hotline had a lot of pretty, what do I want to say, loose publicity. They had a lot of things that today would be considered to be fake news, and did a very good job of it.
In the meantime, Vince, we'll see you down the road, but remember, hardball season hasn't really started yet. Have a bad day.
I think it exposes the Bridgeton Air Defense for what they are, and that is a group of just hate-filled people who have let this whole issue take over their lives, and frankly, I feel very sorry for them.
That probably was his interpretation only, coming from his own selfish ego, quite honestly. because we were doing a lot of good for a lot of people, communicating a very serious issue and communicating the fact that we had to work very hard to be treated fairly.
Part of their success was they didn't feel themselves bound by the traditional rules of politics, the traditional rules of law. And that was so unusual that the political leadership didn't know what to do about them, because they couldn't use the traditional political tools to attack them back the way you might if it were a mayor versus mayor kind of battle.
Mayor, a couple of years ago, the Wall Street Journal, in a very glowing article on St. Louis, called you the King of St. Louis. Why would the King of St. Louis want to become governor of the state of Missouri?
Vince Schamel was in his third term and had just celebrated his 10th anniversary as the mayor of St. Louis and was looking to take the next step up in his political career and had his eyes on the Missouri governor's mansion. So Bridgeton Air Defense slightly altered their strategy from a community grassroots organization to a political action committee and set its sights on Schamel.
We had to let people know Vince Schamel did not deserve to be governor and that he would treat people in outstate Missouri the same way he treated us. That was the message.
BAD took its message across the state, traveling to places like Bowling Green and Independence, and many more towns and counties in between.
There were Democratic Club events in some small towns where we had the ability, we could literature the entire town. Every house, every business, everything, because we had enough people.
I think we're making a very adverse dent, and I think we're being very successful. We have to educate outstate Missourians about what's been going on here in St. Louis.
I think that some of those people are very sincere in the attitudes that they hold, and frankly, I think some of those people are simply political operatives working on behalf of some of my political enemies.
We never went out and campaigned for a politician. We did not directly tell people to vote for Mel Carnahan. We told people not to vote for Vince Schamel.
On August 4th, 1992, Mel Carnahan easily defeated Vince Schamel in the Missouri governor Democratic primary. Schamel only mustered 33% of the statewide vote, and the media proclaimed King of St. Louis even lost to Carnahan in his own city by 16 percentage points.
And it really worked because it was people talking to people. There were no politicians between us.
The FAA threw out the F-4 proposal in 1994.
It kind of died of its own weight, this idea of trying to build this new airport on top of an existing airport. A lot of people eventually saw that this would not work.
With F-4 dead and Vince Schamel losing the governor's race and not running for a fourth term as mayor of St. Louis, it appeared Bridgeton had won the battle. However, a new political regime stepped in, ready to pick up where Vince Schamel left off, meaning the war for Lambert expansion was far from over.
Bridgeton was fighting a 20th century political machine. We knew that it wasn't going to be as simple as killing one of the proposals. The business community's pressure to expand the airport was so strong that they weren't going to stop. And the message was pretty clear. We have a boundary of the city of St. Louis. We're not going to affect St. Louis. We're not going to affect Berkeley. We are going to affect Bridgeton.